had always worked the late shift. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and that's all I could ask for. The corner cafe was a small, modest diner tucked away on a narrow street, often overshadowed by the busier restaurants in the area. It wasn't a place anyone really noticed unless they happened to be passing by in the middle of the night, and I had grown used to its quiet, almost desolate atmosphere. At 24, I had long accepted that working at the cafe was just part of the grind, trying to make ends meet while dealing with the weight of student loans, bills, and the endless stress that came with it. My manager, Carla, was tough but fair in her own way. She ran a tight ship, reminding us constantly that the cafe was a business, not a charity. I couldn't argue with that. I knew my place, and it was to serve customers quickly, keep the place clean, and never, ever give anything away for free. The shift was slow, as it always was on Thursday evenings. Most of the regulars had already eaten, and the rain outside kept the casual walkers away. The soft pitter-patter against the windows and the occasional hum of the refrigerator were the only sounds filling the air. I wiped down the countertops and made sure everything was in order, but my mind wandered to the pile of unpaid bills back home. I had already started worrying about the next paycheck, knowing it wouldn't be enough to cover all my expenses. It was the same cycle every month: bills, stress, and barely making it by. Then, just as I was starting to lose myself in the silence, the door chimed. An old man walked in, his hunched back visible even through the rain-soaked glass. He looked to be in his late 70s, with deeply wrinkled skin and eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of stories. He wore an old coat, one that had clearly been through more than its fair share of winters, and he moved slowly, deliberately. He scanned the cafe, noticing that it was nearly empty, before settling into a booth in the far corner. I smiled as I approached him, trying to keep the usual warmth in my voice. "Evening, sir. What can I get for you?" He glanced up at me, and in his eyes I saw something different. A sadness, a kind of deep, unspoken sorrow that seemed to weigh him down. "Just a cup of black coffee and the soup of the day, please," he said, his voice raspy, like it hadn't been used much in years. I nodded, feeling the weight of his quiet presence as I brought him his coffee. I took a moment to ask if he was from around here, just to make conversation, but his answer was brief. "I used to be," he said softly, his gaze drifting out the window toward the street as if lost in a memory. He continued, "My wife, Lily, and I used to come here all the time, long ago. She passed last month. I just thought I'd stop by for old time's sake." I didn't know what to say to that. It was one of those moments when words felt inadequate. Instead, I just listened as he spoke quietly about the life he had shared with Lily, about their first date here, how they had once talked about their dreams in this very diner. He spoke with such tenderness that I could almost feel their love, even though I had never met her. His sadness was palpable, but there was a kind of peace in his words, like he had made his peace with her passing. We spoke for a while longer, though I didn't know if I was saying anything of value. I simply let him share his memories. When the bill came, I walked over to find him fumbling with his wallet. His hands trembled slightly, and I watched as he counted out the money. His face fell as he realized he was short, only by a couple of dollars. The flush of embarrassment spread across his face, and I could see the weight of his dignity slipping away. I had seen it before, the quiet, unseen struggles of people just trying to get by, trying to hold on to some semblance of pride in a world that often didn't care. I stood there for a moment, torn between doing what I knew I was supposed to do, collecting the money, and something inside me that urged me to do otherwise. It wasn't just the amount of money. It was the fact that this man, who had lived so much of his life, had come to this point where he couldn't even pay for a simple meal. I stood there, watching him, the pile of crumpled bills in his hand, his fingers trembling as he counted again, clearly trying to avoid looking at me. I could feel the weight of the moment settle around us. It wasn't just the $2. It wasn't about the money at all. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. The quiet humiliation of being short, of not having enough to pay for something so simple, felt like a slap in the face to his dignity. And I couldn't bear it. I knew the rules. Carla, my manager, had made them crystal clear. No freebies. Ever. This cafe wasn't a charity. It was a business. We couldn't afford to give away food to anyone. Not for any reason. The cold, practical part of me knew what I was supposed to do. I could just remind him of the total, ask him for the rest, and watch his face fall even further. That's what the rules said. But then there was the part of me that couldn't let this man walk away in shame. There was something in his eyes, something vulnerable that made me feel like I couldn't treat him like just another customer who couldn't afford his meal. Not tonight. I glanced at the tip jar on the counter. The change inside was barely enough to cover the difference. But that didn't matter. I had to do something. My heart made up my mind before my brain could argue with it. I walked over to his table, leaning in just a little so I could speak quietly, hoping Carla wouldn't hear me from the back. "You know what, sir?" I said, my voice soft but firm. "We just started a new promotion. All veterans eat free on Thursdays. I can cover the rest of it." His eyes flickered up to mine, and for a second I thought I saw a flash of disbelief. His expression softened, though, and his lips trembled into a small, grateful smile. "You're a kind young lady," he whispered, his voice shaky but full of gratitude. I smiled back, trying to hide the rush of relief flooding through me. "It's no trouble at all," I said, though part of me knew it was a small, almost ridiculous lie. He wasn't a veteran, but the words had come out before I could stop them. And honestly, in that moment, it felt like the right thing to say. He didn't need to know the truth. He just needed a little dignity back. I turned to walk away, taking the bill with me, and before I reached the counter, I pulled out a few crumpled bills from the tip jar. I wasn't proud of it. I couldn't afford to cover the rest myself, but I knew I had to. It wasn't just about the meal. It was about something bigger. It was about giving someone back a piece of their pride. And in that moment, that meant more than following the rules. When I returned, Thomas was already standing up to leave. He shuffled toward the door slowly, and just as he reached the threshold, he stopped and turned back to me. His eyes, which had been clouded with sadness earlier, now had something different in them, something bright, almost as if a weight had been lifted. "Thank you, young lady," he said, his voice no longer a whisper but a deep, sincere tone. "You're a good soul. You'll see me again, I promise." I smiled, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't think much of it at the time. He was just an old man, maybe a little lost, maybe lonely, but his words stuck with me. "You'll see me again." I couldn't help but wonder what he meant. Was it just something kind to say, or did he really mean it? In that moment, it didn't matter. He was gone, disappearing into the night, his figure fading into the rain-soaked street. I stood there for a moment thinking about his words, but then I heard the door chime again, snapping me out of my thoughts. The quiet buzz of the cafe settled back in, and I returned to my duties. But something had shifted. I couldn't quite explain it. It was like a spark had been lit inside me. Something small but undeniable. Something had changed, not just in him, but in me too. I didn't know it yet, but his visit would alter the course of my life in ways I couldn't imagine. A week passed before I thought about Thomas again. Life had a way of pulling you back into the grind, and the cafe was no exception. The rain had stopped, the evening crowds returned, and I was back to doing what I did best: serving coffee, clearing plates, and taking orders. The monotony was both a comfort and a burden. I had settled into a rhythm, trying to forget about the bills piling up and the stress of making ends meet. But then, just when I thought the night would be like any other, the door chimed. I turned toward the entrance, expecting the usual late-night regulars or perhaps someone looking to escape the rain. But instead, a man in his early 40s stepped inside. His sharp suit and leather briefcase made him stand out in the humble setting of the corner cafe. He wasn't the type of person who usually came in, at least not at this hour. His presence felt almost out of place, like a stark contrast to the quiet, unassuming nature of the diner. He glanced around and his eyes locked on me immediately. My stomach tightened, a sudden wave of uncertainty washing over me. As he walked toward the counter, I could feel every step he took, the weight of his presence undeniable. When he reached me, he stood tall, his gaze intense but calm. "Are you Julia Warren?" His voice was firm, but not unkind. I nodded, unsure of who he was. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The man introduced himself as Mark Henderson, an attorney. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I had no idea what this could be about, but the seriousness in his demeanor made my heart race. "I'm here on behalf of Mr. Thomas Williams," he said smoothly, handing me a thick, sealed envelope. "He passed away last week, but before he did, he left specific instructions for you." My hands trembled as I took the envelope from him. The name hit me like a jolt. Thomas Williams, the man I had helped so briefly, whose eyes had once shown such deep sadness and gratitude. I couldn't believe it. My mind raced, but I could hardly focus on anything other than the envelope in my hands. He had left instructions for me? What could it possibly mean? Mark must have noticed my confusion because he continued in a calm, steady tone. "Mr. Williams left you something. You were the one who showed him kindness during his final days. He made it clear that you were to receive something from him." I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was in a fog, unable to grasp the weight of what he was saying. The letter in my hands felt heavier now, filled with the promise of something I couldn't yet understand. I tore open the envelope, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a letter from Thomas himself, written in elegant handwriting that seemed to carry a sense of finality. I began to read. "Dear Julia, if you are reading this, then my time has passed. I want to thank you for the kindness you showed me when I thought the world had forgotten how to be kind. When you gave me that meal, you gave me something far more valuable than food. You gave me my dignity back. You may not have known it, but that small act restored my faith in humanity." I paused, blinking back tears as I continued reading. "I spent much of my life working, building this cafe with my beloved Lily. It's more than just a business to me. It's a piece of our life together. And when I met you, I saw a young woman who reminded me of the values I held dear. You didn't just give me a meal. You reminded me of the importance of kindness and community. I have no children, so I've decided to leave the cafe to you, Julia. It's my gift to you. I trust you will continue what we started here." I could hardly believe what I was reading. Thomas, the man who had come in so quietly, had left me the cafe. He had left me a business. I looked up at Mark Henderson, my mouth dry. "But I don't understand. Why me? I barely knew him." Mark gave me a small, reassuring smile. "Thomas believed in people like you, Julia. He saw in you something rare, kindness in a world that often forgets it. He wanted someone to carry on what he and Lily started, someone who would make sure this place was about more than just profits. And he chose you." I sat there, stunned. This couldn't be real. A stranger, a man I'd only shared a few moments with, had left me everything, his cafe, his legacy. The weight of it all was overwhelming. I wasn't ready for this, but somehow I knew I had to be. Mark continued, "The deed to the cafe and all its assets are in this envelope. It's yours, Julia. You're the new owner." I stared at the documents in my hands, my mind spinning with disbelief. This was more than I ever thought I could have. This was my chance. My life was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to comprehend. And as I sat there holding the envelope, I realized I wasn't just holding a business. I was holding a legacy, one that had been built on kindness, and now it was my responsibility to carry it forward. The days that followed felt like a blur. I was still trying to process everything, how an ordinary evening at the cafe had led to such an extraordinary change in my life. I had gone from being a struggling waitress to the owner of the corner cafe, a place that was more than just a business. It was a legacy. I had spent so many years trying to survive, to get through each shift, each day. And now it felt like I had been handed something much bigger than I could have ever imagined. But I couldn't just sit on the news. I had to act. I had to make sure that I lived up to Thomas's trust. The first step, of course, was telling Carla. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Carla and I had a complicated relationship. She had always been the one to keep the cafe running like a well-oiled machine, but her methods were cold, business-driven, and sometimes ruthless. She didn't care much about people beyond what they could contribute to the cafe's bottom line. And I knew she wouldn't like what I had to say. I called her into my office, which was really just a small space behind the counter. She came in with that confident stride she always had, her eyes narrowing as she took in my serious expression. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, crossing her arms. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, Carla. There's something I need to tell you. The cafe, it's mine now. Mr. Williams left it to me in his will." She blinked, clearly processing the words. What? That's ridiculous. I've been running this place for years. You're just a... Wait, I interrupted, my voice steady. I'm not saying you haven't worked hard, but this place is now mine, and I plan to take it in a new direction. We're not going to be just a business anymore. This cafe has always meant more than that, and I intend to honor Mr. Williams's wishes. She looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and anger. You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to stay here under your leadership. I've done everything for this place, and you come in and take over like this? I had expected this reaction. But what I didn't expect was the wave of relief that washed over me as I stood my ground. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about doing what was right for the cafe, for the community, and for the legacy Thomas had left me. I'm sorry, Carla, but you're not going to fit in with the way I want to run things here, I said, my voice firmer now. I think it's best if we part ways. Her face flushed with anger, and she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I didn't feel relief right away. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but I was also sad. Carla had been a part of this place for a long time, but I couldn't let her way of running things hold me back. After she left, I sat in the office, trying to gather my thoughts. What now? I couldn't just sit back and let the cafe continue as it was. I had to make changes. Big changes. The first was the menu. I wanted the food to be better, fresher. I wanted people to come in, not just because they were hungry, but because they knew this place stood for something more. I spent the next few days meeting with suppliers, redesigning the menu, and brainstorming ways to make the cafe feel more welcoming. I decided to keep some of the old favorites, like the soup Thomas used to love, but I added more modern, locally sourced options, and I created a new system, a pay-it-forward policy. I wanted to honor Thomas's legacy by making sure that anyone who was struggling could still come in, get a hot meal, and feel like they mattered. The cafe slowly began to transform. As word spread about the changes, more people started to visit. They weren't just coming for the food. They were coming because they wanted to be a part of something good. It wasn't just a cafe anymore. It was a community, and I knew that I had made the right decision. A few weeks later, I sat down in the same booth where Thomas had sat during that rainy night. The cafe was bustling with energy, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. I smiled, thinking about how far we had come. Thomas had promised that I would see him again, and in a way, I did. His spirit lived on in this place, in every meal we served, in every kind gesture, and in every person who walked through the door. I realized then that it wasn't just about owning a cafe. It was about honoring the people who came before me, and about making sure that this place would always be a symbol of kindness and community, just like Thomas had hoped. A few months had passed since I took over the corner cafe, and things had changed in ways I hadn't anticipated. The cafe was thriving in a way I hadn't imagined possible. The renovations were complete, and the place felt different, warmer, more welcoming. The pay-it-forward system was in full swing, and we had even started offering a community board where people could leave messages of support, share resources, or simply write a kind word to someone else. It wasn't just about good food anymore. It was about creating a space where people felt valued. I spent most days running around, managing the kitchen, meeting with suppliers, and making sure the staff was happy. It wasn't easy, but it was the kind of hard work I'd always hoped for. And with every passing day, I felt more at home in the cafe, more connected to its history, and more determined to keep building on the legacy Thomas had left me. But as much as things had improved, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was still on the edge of something bigger. The weight of what had been given to me, not just the cafe, but the responsibility to carry Thomas's vision forward, still lingered. One evening, as I was wiping down the counter and getting ready to close for the night, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. It was the lawyer, Mark Henderson, the one who had brought me the news of Thomas's passing. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen him since that day, and I wondered if he had come to check up on the cafe or if there was something else he needed to say. He stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room as he walked toward the counter. "Good evening, Julia," he greeted me with a polite smile, though I could sense a certain heaviness in his demeanor. "Mark?" I said, returning the smile. It's good to see you. What brings you by? He gestured toward the cafe, taking in the changes with a nod. I've been hearing good things about the place, he said. I see you've done a wonderful job. Thomas would have been proud. The words stung a little, a mixture of pride and loss. Thank you, I replied, trying to hide the emotion in my voice. It's been a lot of work, but I'm trying to honor his vision. Mark looked at me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Julia, I need to tell you something important. He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. You know that Thomas was a private man, but I'm afraid he didn't leave all the details about the cafe to you. There was something else, something that he had planned before his passing. My stomach churned. What do you mean? I asked, my voice tight. What else did he leave me? Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. Thomas had a personal investment in this cafe. The property, the building, it wasn't just part of his business. It was also part of a trust he created for a specific purpose. The cafe, along with its assets, is now part of a larger charitable foundation. You're the sole beneficiary of that trust now, Julia. You're not just the owner of the cafe, you're also the steward of this foundation. I froze, my breath catching in my chest. A foundation? I repeated, struggling to process his words. Yes, Mark confirmed, nodding. Thomas believed in giving back. The cafe was his legacy, but the foundation is where he hoped the real change would happen. The trust's purpose is to support local causes, feeding the hungry, offering scholarships, providing emergency assistance to families in need. You're now in charge of overseeing that fund, Julia. It's yours to manage. I felt my knees go weak. I never imagined that taking over the cafe would come with so much responsibility. It was overwhelming to think about all that Thomas had entrusted to me. Not just the cafe, but the potential to make a real impact on the community, to change lives the way he had. Mark must have seen the shock on my face, because he added, You don't have to do it alone, of course. There's a team set up to help you manage the foundation, but you'll need to make some decisions soon about how you want to move forward. I nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of what he had just told me. I never expected this, I murmured. I just wanted to keep the cafe going, to make it a place that mattered. I didn't realize it came with all of this. Mark gave me a reassuring smile. You've got this, Julia. You're doing exactly what Thomas wanted. You're making the cafe a place that gives back, just like he envisioned. And now you've got the chance to take that vision even further. As he left that night, I sat in the booth where I had shared so many quiet thoughts about what I wanted to achieve. Now, I knew that I had an even bigger role to play. The cafe was no longer just a business. It was a platform for change, a chance to do something that would leave a lasting mark on this community. And somehow, in the midst of everything, I felt like I had found my true purpose. It wasn't just about running a cafe anymore. It was about giving, about making sure that kindness lived on, not just in the food we served, but in the very heart of this place. And that was the greatest gift of all. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind. I had no idea what I was getting into when I first started running the cafe. But now, with the foundation and its mission on my shoulders, the weight of responsibility was both exhilarating and terrifying. I spent long hours learning everything I could about running the foundation, meeting with advisors, reviewing the trust documents, and figuring out how to allocate funds for the causes Thomas had cared about. The cafe was still my primary focus, but now it felt like the cafe and the foundation were interconnected, both serving the same purpose, giving back to the community. It was strange at first to see the cafe as more than just a business. It had always been about serving meals and making a living. But now, every decision I made, from the food we served to the way we treated our customers, felt like part of something larger. The Pay It Forward system, which had started as just a small gesture, began to grow. More and more people started coming in, not just for the food, but because they felt like they were part of something meaningful. We had regulars who would donate extra money to the system, knowing that their contributions were going to help others. The cafe was becoming a place where kindness wasn't just a policy. It was the very foundation of everything we did. Still, there were challenges. I had to balance the business side of things with the charitable aspect, making sure the cafe remained financially stable while also ensuring that we were able to support local causes. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt like I was running on empty, especially when the weight of everything began to feel too much. But each time I thought about stepping back, I remembered Thomas's vision, and I knew that I couldn't give up. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings about the foundation, I decided to take a break. I sat in the booth by the window, the one where Thomas had sat that rainy night. I watched the street outside, the dim streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement, and I thought about how far we had come. A year ago, I had been a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. Now I was the owner of a cafe and the steward of a foundation that could change lives. It felt surreal. As I sat there, lost in thought, the door chimed, and a familiar face walked in. It was Sal, the old cook who had worked here long before I'd ever started. He had been with Thomas and Lily since the beginning, and even though he had retired a few years ago, he still stopped by now and then to check on things. "Evening, kid," Sal said with a smile, taking a seat across from me. "I see things are going well around here." I smiled back, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. "Yeah, it's been a crazy year, but we're getting there." He looked around the cafe, taking in the changes. The new menu, the community board by the door, the way people were chatting and laughing together. "You're doing good work, Julia. Thomas would be proud of you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had always wanted to make Thomas proud, but now, hearing it from someone who had known him so well, it felt different. It felt like a validation of everything I had done. "I just want to make sure his vision lives on," I said quietly. "I don't want this place to be just another business. I want it to mean something, you know?" Sal nodded, his expression softening. "It already does, kid. You're building something special here. This place, this cafe, it's more than just food. It's a community, and you've made it that." We sat in silence for a moment, and I let his words sink in. It was a reminder that what we were doing here wasn't just about surviving. It was about creating something lasting, something that would outlive me, just as Thomas's legacy had outlived him. After Sal left, I stayed in the booth for a little while longer, thinking about all that had happened. I had built something from the ground up, not just a cafe, but a place of refuge, a place of hope. And as I looked around at the people laughing, eating, and sharing stories, I knew that this was exactly what Thomas had envisioned. The foundation was still in its early stages, but I was beginning to see its impact. We had already helped several families with emergency expenses, funded scholarships for local students, and even supported a few community events. Every time I saw the smile on someone's face, every time I heard about someone's life being changed, I knew that we were doing the right thing. I was no longer just running a cafe. I was part of something much bigger than myself. And for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. A year had passed since I took over the corner cafe, and things had only grown more intense. The cafe was thriving, the foundation was gaining traction, and the community was responding in ways I hadn't imagined. But with success came more responsibility. I had barely enough time to catch my breath between managing the cafe's daily operations and overseeing the foundation's growth. I had always thought that owning a business would be the hardest part, but I'd learned that managing something with a higher purpose was a whole new level of challenge. One morning, as I sipped my coffee in the back office, I reflected on how much had changed. I remembered when I was just a waitress working long, lonely shifts, barely scraping by. Now I sat in an office that had once been a cluttered supply closet, a place where I made decisions that affected not just the cafe, but the lives of those in the community. The walls, once bare and depressing, now proudly displayed pictures from local events we had sponsored, certificates of appreciation from families we had helped, and notes from people who had received scholarships through the foundation. Every piece of paper on the wall told a story, a reminder of why I had taken on this responsibility in the first place. But as proud as I was of the changes, I had moments of doubt. The weight of everything rested squarely on my shoulders. There were days when I questioned whether I was doing enough, whether I was truly honoring Thomas's vision, or if I was simply trying to keep my head above water. The cafe had become a cornerstone of the community, But running a cafe and a charitable foundation wasn't easy. There were constant decisions to be made, people to manage, and challenges that seemed to appear out of nowhere. And sometimes it felt like no matter how much I did, it wasn't enough. I was snapped out of my thoughts when the door to the cafe opened, and I looked up to see a familiar face. It was Emma, one of our regulars, a single mother who had been struggling to make ends meet when we first met. She had been one of the first to take advantage of the pay-it-forward system, and over time, she had become part of the cafe's extended family. She had a bright smile, but today, her expression was more somber than usual. "Hey, Julia," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Do you have a minute?" I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Emma hesitated for a moment, then looked me straight in the eye. "I need to thank you," she said quietly. "I don't think I've ever really said it before, but you've changed my life. When I first came here, I didn't know how I was going to feed my kids. But because of what you've done here, I've been able to keep going, keep working, keep fighting for them." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Emma had been struggling with not just finances, but with a sense of hopelessness. When she had first started coming to the cafe, I had seen the exhaustion in her eyes. But now, she looked different, stronger, more hopeful. "I don't know what to say," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just doing what Thomas would have wanted. We're all just trying to help each other." Emma smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "You're doing more than helping. You're giving people hope. You've given me hope. I'm working 2 jobs now, and my kids are doing better in school, and I've finally been able to save enough to start paying off my debt." Tears stung at the back of my eyes. This was why I'd done it. This was what I had been fighting for, even on the hardest days. I had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could ripple out like this, changing someone's life, and in turn, creating a chain of hope and opportunity. "I'm so proud of you, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You've done the hard work. I'm just glad we could be here for you." She wiped away a tear, nodding. "You've made a real difference, Julia, and I want you to know you're not alone in this. We're all here. The cafe, the foundation, the community. We're all part of this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been carrying so much on my own, trying to do it all myself, but Emma's words reminded me that I wasn't alone. The community we had built wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, people who believed in kindness, people who believed that we could make the world a better place, one small act at a time. As Emma left that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, there were still challenges ahead. There were days when I felt like I couldn't keep up, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But as long as we kept helping, kept lifting each other up, I knew that we were on the right path. The cafe wasn't just a business anymore. It was a movement, and we were all in it together. And that, I realized, was exactly what Thomas had envisioned. The days seemed to blur together, each one packed with a new set of challenges and triumphs. The corner cafe had become a place that I could never have imagined when I first started here. It was no longer just a cafe. It was a hub of community, a place where people found more than just food. They found connection. They found hope. And as much as that filled my heart, it also made the pressure to continue growing that much heavier. I had to make sure I was doing right by Thomas's legacy, and that weight was constant, hanging over my head. Despite the pressure, I had moments of clarity, moments when everything seemed to fall into place. One of those moments happened on a quiet afternoon when the cafe was a little slower than usual. I was standing at the counter, absent-mindedly wiping it down, when a familiar face walked in. It was Thomas's old friend, Sal, the cook who had been with him since the early days of the cafe. Sal had retired years ago, but he still stopped by from time to time, checking in on things and offering his wisdom when I needed it. Today, he walked in with his usual steady pace, but there was something different about him. He had a sort of quiet confidence in his step, and he seemed more at peace than I remembered. He smiled at me as he approached the counter. "Hey there, kid," Sal said, his gravelly voice warm as always. "How's it going?" I smiled back, wiping my hands on the towel. "It's going, Sal. You know, keeping everything running. How about you?" He leaned on the counter, his old eyes scanning the cafe before meeting mine. You've done something special here, Julia. I've been coming in now and then, and I can feel it. This place is alive again, and it's not just because of the food. I felt a lump form in my throat at his words. The cafe had always felt like home to me, but to hear it from Sal, someone who had known Thomas and Lily for so long, made it feel real in a way I couldn't explain. I'm just trying to keep it going, I said quietly. I want to honor what Thomas built here, you know? But sometimes it feels like I'm not doing enough. Sal raised an eyebrow, his expression softening. You're doing more than enough. You've taken something that was once a simple cafe and turned it into a place where people actually matter. And that's not easy. Trust me, Thomas would be proud of you. His words, simple as they were, hit me hard. There had been so many days when I questioned if I was doing the right thing. Running a business was hard enough, but running one with a larger purpose? It felt overwhelming at times. But in that moment, standing there with Sal, I realized that I had done it. I had turned this place into something that mattered, something that people could rely on. And for the first time in a while, I felt like I wasn't alone in this journey. I don't know how I'm going to keep up with it all, I admitted, my voice faltering slightly. The cafe, the foundation, sometimes it feels like too much. Sal nodded, understanding. It's a lot, kid, but you've got something special. And it's not about doing it all at once. It's about taking it one step at a time, making the right choices, and knowing that you're doing the best you can. You've already done more than most people ever will. I took a deep breath, his words sinking in. Thanks, Sal. That means more than you know. He patted my shoulder gently. Don't mention it. I'm just glad I get to see it all unfold. You've got a good heart, Julia. That's what makes all the difference. As he left the cafe that day, I stood there for a moment, reflecting on his words. Sal was right. I had come so far from where I started, and even though the road ahead was still uncertain, I knew I had a purpose now. This cafe wasn't just mine anymore. It was a place for the community, a place where people found more than just food. They found kindness, understanding, and the belief that they mattered. The weight of responsibility didn't feel so heavy anymore. It felt like a gift. And with each passing day, I realized that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The legacy of Thomas and Lily lived on through every smile, every meal, and every act of kindness. And that was enough to keep me going. Life often feels like an unpredictable journey, and along the way, we face moments of doubt, struggle, and uncertainty. But the most important advice I can offer is to stay true to your values and never underestimate the power of kindness. Small acts of compassion, whether it's helping a stranger, giving someone a chance, or offering support when it's needed most, can have a ripple effect far beyond what we can see. Success isn't just about achieving financial goals or career milestones. It's about making a difference, no matter how small, in the lives of others. Life can be overwhelming at times, especially when juggling responsibilities and ambitions. But remember that each step you take, no matter how small, is a part of something bigger. Focus on progress, not perfection. And when you feel like giving up, look around at the community you've built, the people you've helped, and the lives you've touched. Those moments of connection and impact are the true markers of success. Keep moving forward, trust your heart, and know that what you put into the world will eventually come back to you in ways you may never expect.